and welcome to Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. Each episode is devoted to one piece of pop culture that we can't agree on. As a way of preserving the friendship and reaching common ground, we revisit the work, hear each other out, and decide whether our friendship truly can survive. I'm Nate Goss.
And I'm Ryan Ebling. It's springtime. The weather's warming up. That is to say, we believe that eventually the weather will warm up.
Yes.
Baseball season has begun. And since Nate and I are probably more likely to hit our own faces with a bat than to make contact with any pitch thrown our way, we've decided to honor America's pastime in our own way, arguing about a baseball movie. We've even brought in some dirt to kick at each other, and you can't see it, but we're both wearing caps just so we can throw them on the ground indignantly. This episode, we're discussing the 1993 movie, The Sandlot. Can Nate convince me that not liking The Sandlot is as unforgivable as not knowing who the great Bambino is? Or can I show Nate that he's been wrong all these years and help him to get out of the biggest pickle he's ever been in?
Stay tuned.
Hey, you want a s'more? S'more what? No, you want a s'more. I haven't had anything yet, so how can I have some more of nothing?
Shut up!
You're killing me, Smalls.
All right, who cut one?
These are s'more stuff. Okay, pay attention. First, you take the ground. You stick the chocolate on the ground. Then, you roast the mallow.
No, it's my sleeping bag. That's mine.
When the mallow's flaming,
Yes, it is yours. It has a yellow stain on it.
you stick it on the chocolate.
I'm gonna set the place
Then-
on fire, Ham.
You cover it with the other end.
Here, make me one of those. Yeah, me too.
Then, you scuff.
I don't like that chocolate.
Kind of messy, but good. Try some.
Okay.
That clip always makes me want a s'more. How about you, Ryan?
I don't know. I've always hated the fact that he calls it a mallow, whatever he calls it.
You don't like that?
No, I'm sorry. I've never called it that in my life.
I've never called it a marshmallow again in my life. It's the first time ever, actually. All right. So if you can tell from the clip, we are talking about The Sandlot, the 1993 movie. And if you have not seen The Sandlot, we're going to be talking about it in depth. So you need to watch it beforehand, or you're going to be full of, you're going to be spoiled, I guess is what, is that what you call it? If someone spoils something for you? Doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right.
But I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
So go ahead and go to the library and get The Sandlot, check it out, watch it, and then come back to this podcast episode. For those of you who have seen The Sandlot, but it's been a while, I have the DVD box right here, and I think I'm going to let the DVD do all the talking for me. So here's a quick synopsis of The Sandlot. It's the early 1960s. The fifth grader Scotty Smalls has just moved into town with his folks. Kids call him a dork. He can't even throw a baseball. But that changes when the leader of the neighborhood gang recruits him to play on the nearby Sandlot field. It's the beginning of a magical summer of baseball. Wild adventures, first kisses, and fearsome confrontations with the dreaded Beast and its owner, who live behind the left field fence. Soon, 9 boys have become best friends. Scotty is part of a team, and their leader has become a local legend in this hilarious and wholehearted comedy.
Actually, I don't think you need to see the movie anymore. That
It's
pretty
there.
much takes you to the end of it. All right, now The Sandlot didn't do amazingly well at the box office, grossing just over $32 million. It's got a 63% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it was pretty well received.
I will add 90% though from the audience. 63% in Rotten Tomatoes.
In the Rotten Tomatoes thing. Okay, that's what I was about to say.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for interrupting.
I didn't mean
me.
to get you spoiled.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you've spoiled me. However, the real story of The Sandlot's reception is in its current status as a movie that many people revere because they loved it when they were children. I guess that's a little slanted take on that. It's often quoted, perhaps too often, and is the kind of movie that will elicit nearly universal praise from most people. I'll say that again. Nearly universal praise from most people.
Why does that need to get said again? Can't we just let it be?
No,
We can't.
not
okay.
at all.
Maybe we should jump in then to where I think you're naturally leading this discussion, which is talking about our original reception to The Sandlot when we first watched it, whatever age that was.
Yeah, and I got to say, my what I'm going to talk about here is partly my initial reaction and partly my view of it over the years before rewatching it for this episode.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I loved movie trailers. And if YouTube had existed when we were kids, I probably would have spent hours just watching trailers. And
Not much has changed then.
no, that's true. It's days now, not just hours watching trailers. But the Sandlot trailer sticks out in my memory because I remember that one image of the giant dog,
The beast,
swallowing a
yeah.
baseball.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't figure out like how does a giant dog fit in with a baseball
I remember
movie?
that too, yeah.
And I think looking back, I think I was pretty literal minded because it didn't connect with me that they were just showing the kid's perception of the dog.
Right.
I was kind of dim. I remember actually there was the Father of the Bride trailer where like he imagines his daughter saying, "I met a boy in Rome and we're getting married," and I was like, "Oh, isn't that funny? Her little sister is saying the same thing." Like it did not connect with me at all that there was some fantasy element. But so I remember snippets of the movie, and I think I liked it just fine when I saw it as a kid.
Wait, so when did you see this movie? How old were you? Or
Oh, I
did
was
you
a kid, yeah.
You saw it when it? Did you see it in the theater? Did you see it?
No, I saw it on
VHS.
tape. Yeah.
But this was when it around.
Yeah, it
when
would have been a
first
new
came out?
release.
Yeah. Okay.
It would have been on the outer wall of Blockbuster, not
Yeah.
on the inner
The
shelves.
perimeters where we
Yeah.
all stayed,
Right.
rarely venturing inwards.
Right. And so I think over time I've bristled at the near constant quoting to death of lines like "You're killing me, Smalls" and "Forever."
Forever. 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 Forever.
And I roll my eyes, to be honest, whenever I hear them. But I can't fault the movie for that. That's not the movie's fault. I've just never had the undying affection for the movie that most people have. So I was afraid that this would be a tough rewatch because it's more or less a movie for kids. And I wondered, will I, as an adult, just not connect with things that aren't supposed to be more than just amusing for kids? And in reflecting on the movie, I think one thing that didn't work for me as a kid was how much I remember it being a movie about adults remembering being kids.
You didn't like that part of it?
Right. I didn't connect with it.
Okay.
I don't think as a kid. And for me, having, a scary big dog would have been enough, but you had to go and make it confusing by making it this big dog so that adults could remember.
You just
It
weren't
just
getting
confused. Yeah.
Wait, so is this dog big?
Yeah,
Now it's
what's
small?
happening here? Why isn't anybody questioning the shape-shifting powers of this dog? So I felt like, in reflection, I don't think I had this coherent of a thought as a kid watching the movie, that kids don't need to be reminded of what it's like to be a kid. So was this movie for kids or was it for adults? Nowadays, movies are clearly marketed to both, and there's mixed results for that. But in 1993, maybe the balance just wasn't so often aspired to, and The Sandlot was pioneering new territory. So any lack of nuance to that end that I'm remembering should be forgiven. I was of several minds before I watched this movie.
You were a tortured soul
I
as a
was,
child, I
yeah.
can tell. Okay. Well, why don't I tell you a little bit about when I first watched The Sandlot?
Please
And we
do.
know from the preview in the last episode that I am the one that loves this movie and that you were the one that was just kind of okay with it.
Right.
And so this is one of my all-time favorites. And especially if you're going to ask me what my favorite baseball movie, maybe even sports movie, if you can even call this a sports movie, I don't really know that we can debate that even, I think. But this is always at the top of my list. But the crazy thing is, I tried. I can't remember the first time I saw this movie. It is so ingrained into me as just being a part of who I am. I know I can't even count how many times I've seen it, but I don't remember the first time. It was not in the theater, but I do remember seeing that trailer with the big dog and thinking like, boy, does it have this horror or scary element to it? Like,
Right.
And really not getting it. And then I think it might have been at like a cousin's house or something that they had it on VHS and we finally watched it. And I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I just remember watching it over and over and over again. And I think that is a lot of people's shared experience, which is why it gets quoted so often. When you're a kid, especially hearing something, maybe for you it was different. For me, I think when you heard something quoted over and over and over again, it just doesn't seem to tire as easily as it does these days if I hear something quoted over and over and over again. But I do remember when I watched it, I just know that I was the perfect age for this movie. This movie was a movie that was made for I was like the target audience for this movie.
See,
I
I
was
think-
the age of the kids in the movie, maybe a little bit younger, but not by much.
I think I was too. I was 9,
Right.
and I loved sports and baseball. Like this, I thought as a kid
Right.
before I saw the movie.
And
I thought,
baseball was the only sport I actually played when I was
Oh.
a kid, like in school. And that was what me and my brother did all the time was we just played catch in the backyard all the time, all summer long. But and maybe that's why I loved it so much. For me, it wasn't nostalgia. I was watching it as my life. This was my life. And only now do I watch it with any tinge of nostalgia. And so it had been a couple years though since I had watched it, and I'll talk about just my fear before watching it. Before we actually get into our experience rewatching it, I had the fear that this was not going to hold up because of my nostalgia for the experience of watching The Sandlot. So I had this nostalgic memory of how much I love this movie, and I was really scared that going back to it, it just wasn't going to hold up, and
Yeah.
it was going to be way more dated than I remember. The comedy was going to fall flat, and it just
Yeah.
wasn't going to have any appeal to me
and it would
whatsoever
throw
anymore.
everything you believed into question.
Yes, as a cynical 30-something adult, does The Sandlot still have meaning? It's a good question.
It is a good question. So there's a lot riding on this viewing for you.
There was, yeah.
And how'd it go?
I was okay. So should we just jump into it then? Let's
Sure.
talk about our rewatching experience.
I think so.
So I rewatched this movie. My wife had never seen this before, which
Ever?
I thought was unforgivable.
I don't know if my
I made
I
maybe
think
a
my wife
a
had.
literal
No, my wife had. We watched it
gasp
together.
when okay.
Wow, I'm surprised actually.
Yeah, she had never seen it.
Huh.
So, and I only found out maybe about 2 years ago that she had never seen Jurassic Park until I made. So I don't know
What?
what the deal was with my wife's childhood. but
1993, same year. I
That's
can't
true.
believe.
Maybe she
Was
just.
she in a coma?
I'll ask her that. I don't really know. There's obviously a lot I don't know about my wife
Really?
and her childhood. That's besides the point, though.
You may want to freeze your bank accounts until you find
I-
more.
Okay, I'm on it. Let me pull the app up real quick. But so we decided to watch it together because I thought I would get the experience of someone who had never seen it before, the fresh eyes. And
Yeah.
she was an adult, so that would be interesting. And she's a girl, so this is obviously a boys' movie. So
Very obvious. it
yeah,
is.
so I thought this would be an interesting thing to do. And when I first put on the DVD, I was worried because the first scenes in this movie have that 90s sort of music to it. And it's got the it's got this graphic that comes up for
Yeah.
the Sandlot that's
Right.
so 90s, and I was like, I don't remember it being this dated at all.
Well,
And
yeah.
I was really getting scared, like
Really?
biting my nails, scared. But you know what? I
biting your nails scared, really?
I bite my nails all the time, so really that wasn't it wasn't a point.
It was biting my nails,
biting my
comma,
nails
scared.
as I always do, comma scared.
Okay.
But then I let it go for a little bit, and it's basically as soon as he starts reminiscing and it jumps back in time, I was right back where I remember this movie being. That this movie, I think, once it got going, it held up so well to me, and it held up just as much as I remembered it. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it's great, and I think it works on so many levels, and I hope that we get to talk about a lot of them. But I do want to hear just your initial reactions to this movie.
Yeah, in a strange way, the 90s-ness of it, I think transported me to the appropriate place of nostalgia that it was trying to engender in the adults at the time of the
Okay.
60s. I feel like when
You're
that
the next
title-
step forward.
right, like it's sort of a meta, I don't know, not meta, but like second generation nostalgia. That the music and the title and the credits, I was like, oh yeah. It really reminded me of a lot of stuff from my childhood. It brought me back to that time watching the trailer. It
Yeah.
brought me back to a lot of things. But I think that's sort of incidental. It wasn't necessarily on the part of the filmmakers to let's make this really dated.
Right.
In the future, people will. But I think that the nostalgia that is intended, it really does work. I think it just fosters this general nostalgia, maybe not necessarily for the 60s, but just for childhood. And when
Hmm.
summer meant you didn't have to do anything
Yeah.
but go outside, that was like your only obligation. Um, so my fear before watching it was that as an adult, uh, it wouldn't work because it was a movie geared towards kids.
Hmm.
But what ended up happening, surprisingly, is that as an adult, I really bought into the nostalgia, to the view of childhood. It took me back to just what it was like to be a kid, and I enjoyed watching the movie a lot more than I thought I would.
I'm so relieved because I did not want to argue about this movie. I'm sure
And
we'll get
I
into
know
some
you didn't.
things. We'll get into some things that we maybe see a little bit differently or don't think this isn't a perfect movie.
No,
But
oh,
but
goodness.
go ahead. I just wanted to express that a weight has been lifted off my
That's good.
shoulders at this
I mean,
point.
I didn't. It would have been lousy of me to make you to rake you over the coals for this, because it is a movie for kids. There's some broad things. There's some you know problems I have with it, but I wasn't going to make you defend it and have you just say, "Well, I'm sorry, I liked it when I was a kid." Um, so I did enjoy it. I tried to be as open as I possibly
Mhm.
could. Um, the things that were clearly geared towards kids really fell flat with me. I don't think the movie's funny, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't. I don't know.
I was surprised how much I still laughed out loud. But I
Really,
wonder though, do you think it's a reflection of my experience watching it as a kid? I was laughing before it even happened. That's the
oh
thing
well,
is I
yeah.
was
I'm
like,
sure.
we can talk about specific scenes,
I'm
but
sure. Then I don't remember how much I thought. I think as a kid I didn't really think it was that funny.
okay.
Um, and so definitely now as an adult, I didn't think it was funny. I thought, um, but overall, it was an enjoyable experience, which is odd. I enjoyed myself even though I wasn't laughing when I was supposed to. I just really thought that uh, for some reason, the character of Scotty Smalls resonated with me this time around. I think I was not necessarily like a dorky kid, but I was a really nervous kid and a
Right.
really like. So when he, falls to pieces when the Babe Ruth ball gets hit over the fence,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that scene really, the anguish there was just like
Well,
so
there's this
identifiable, and there's just a lot to identify with in this movie.
yeah, I think Smalls is definitely the one that I identified with as a kid.
Do you remember learning how to throw?
I remember where I learned. I don't remember how though. I mean, I learned in Little League.
I don't remember
My
ever learning that. I think I was a
how to
natural
throw.
athlete.
But it is a weird thing. Like you watch him throw the ball for the first time, and you think to yourself, "How do you learn that?" It is
Yeah.
not a natural thing to know what to do. I don't think.
Yeah. I don't know. It was. I mean, that scene was a little silly. If he already knows how to throw a newspaper,
Well, you're on your
wouldn't he be
bike, and you
able to
gotta.
throw?
That's a different kind of throw.
That is, but that's not how he described it.
Okay.
Doesn't really matter. But
The point though, I think, is that I was thinking about this as I was watching it now. This is before the internet. This is before you have the quick reference of just looking something up. So how do you learn new things in general? How did I learn new things in general when I was a kid?
yeah,
You learn it through your peers, which is going to be shaky knowledge at best. Usually,
yeah.
you're going to learn it through your parents. Or you're just gonna have to maybe go to the library and get a book about it or something. But I just think that for me, it was like, how did I learn about baseball? My dad did not teach me baseball,
Really?
and I remember now that I learned the same way Smalls did. I pretended like I knew what I was talking about when I was talking to my friends who all loved baseball, and obviously their dads had showed them how to play baseball, and we would play. This was actually in Little League. This wasn't necessarily just us kind of throwing the ball together on our
Yeah.
own. It's an interesting thing to think about that I think it in the movie portrays it so well that there's this element when you're in, especially in that junior high age, and you're just trying to fit in,
Yeah.
and you can't let people know that you don't know something,
Right.
but you obviously don't know something. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to piece it together, and sometimes you piece it together in some very
Yeah.
erroneous kind of ways. you know?
Yeah.
I had no idea who they were talking about.
What did he say?
What, were you born in a barn, man?
Yeah, what planet are you from?
But there was no way I could let them know.
You never heard of the Sultan of SWAT?
The Titan of Terror.
The Colossus of Clout? The Colossus of Clout.
The king of trash, man.
So, I lied.
Oh, yeah, the Great Bambino. Of course. I thought you said the Great Bambi.
That wimpy deer?
Yeah, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah. It gets a lot of things right about the uncertainty of that age and the joys of that age. That just, how great it was to have fireworks or like just whatever.
Right.
I think it works on that level really well.
I think it's a very honest, real feeling movie in a lot of ways for being boys. Now, I don't think.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, this is a boys junior high
100%
boy experience
Yeah.
movie, and I don't expect. In fact, I was talking to a coworker. She had basically said that it's a great movie for boys.
Yeah.
And then she said, we have, what was it called, Then and Now?
Oh, yeah, right.
She's like,
it's the same thing.
She's like, it was basically our Sandlot.
That makes sense. My wife watched The Sandlot with me, and she called it a sexist movie.
That's interesting.
I said much the same thing. Her thing was that the only women in it are his mother and Wendy Peppercorn. And the only other reference that she recalled to girls is through
The insult.
insults.
Yeah.
You play like a girl, and then when they think it's too hot outside to play, Benny says something about like, where's their mother's bras? Like any
and then when
reference to like
what's the
weakness.
catcher's name? Part of his trash talk when they're batting is that your sister out there naked?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I
So-
laughed at that part.
Yeah. It was kind of like you could see Seth Rogen playing that part.
Right.
That sort of just riffing. I thought that scene kind of worked too. But yeah, it was. Is it a sexist movie? Is an interesting question. To me, sexist implies negative intent, whereas I think the movie it does play a lot from the mindset of an elementary middle school age boy.
Yeah.
And if there's any sexism, it is from an area of
Ignorance. Exactly.
You just don't know anything about girls.
Yeah.
Like,
I had the same thought this week as I was watching it, and that's what I came to the conclusion of. It does not bother me because if it's sexist, it's because junior high boys are sexist. That this is the way that the boys think about sex.
Yeah.
It's true. The only girls in this movie are Small's mom, who's a mom, nothing more.
And I don't think she's got a name.
She probably doesn't. She's just mom. I mean,
But Bill's Bill. Yeah.
yeah, and because he's the stepdad, he hasn't quite earned dad yet.
Right.
I think by the end of the movie, he does call him dad. Actually,
Well, he calls him dad throughout, but he waffles between dad and
you
Bill.
can, yeah. So, anyways, and then there's Wendy Peppercorn. She's obviously little more than an object of sexual desire.
Yeah.
But I guess to me, it perfectly captures that sexual awakening as boys start to notice women.
Mhm.
And I want to put women in quotes because I feel like
As a concept, women.
as a concept,
Not
women.
as human beings.
And I want to say women instead of girls because the other thing I thought was interesting is you don't see any girl peers in this movie at all.
That's true.
They're never even in there.
That's true.
And
Except I think they get vomited on in the
Yes, but even then
carnival
they
scene.
seem maybe a little bit older, like they were the high school
Yeah,
dates or
that's
something
true.
like that. Because I
and
feel
no
like
sisters.
I wonder if that's intentional though, because I kind of remember being that age. You're still at that age where girls are kind of gross.
Yeah.
Your peers are gross, the girls are gross, but at the same time, there's this paradox of you're starting to notice women.
Yeah.
You're preferring to still be around boys all the time at this age.
Mhm.
I think that's what's great about this as a junior high movie, because I think by the time you get to high school, and there's tons of nostalgic movies about high school, American Graffiti, Can't Hardly Wait,
Dazed and Confused.
but by then the girls have won out. You know, it is no longer a surprise or a new thing that the guys are chasing the girls. This is
Right.
what happens at that age. But this is still an age where you haven't come to that yet.
Yeah.
And the girls of your peer group are not, they're the gross girls still, but you're still noticing the a little bit older girls.
Right.
And there's something very alluring and hypnotizing about that. I guess what I come back to is it sexist? I mean, it's only sexist in the sense that that's the way boys are finally starting to awaken to this kind of thing at that exact age. I think this movie is so true in a way that I don't think a family film could even be now,
Yeah.
about what it's like to be a junior high boy.
Yeah. I think that's true. It's I mean, boys don't know what sort of sweeping statement they're making when they make "you play like a girl" be an insult.
Right. I mean, it would be about the same as calling what Squints does to Wendy Peppercorn as sexual assault. I mean, it's
true.
It's not. I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, it's Smalls in the overdub from him reflecting back on what Squints had done. It says what he'd done was sneaky, wrong, and cool. You know, it's like the perfect way to package that.
Yeah.
As looking through back as what it was like, the way you thought of that incident as a junior high boy.
Right.
Now, if I was a 30-year-old man and I had done that to
that would
to
be
Wendy
sexual
Peppercorn.
assault. Yikes. So, watching it this time, did you was there anything, was it just a joyous experience, a joyous return to your childhood, or were there things that as an adult you were like, well,
Yeah,
were there?
there was one big one, and that was well, I do not remember it playing out like this at all as a kid, but okay, so in one sense I think this movie is a little ahead of its time because it does play so well to both adults and kids. And maybe you don't agree. I don't know, you're looking at me like you don't think you agree with that.
I mean, I guess I do, in that it played sort of well to me as an adult, but I also don't think it played well to me as a kid.
I feel
Even
like
a kid who really wanted to see it and liked sports.
okay. I guess I feel like maybe
But that's just me personally.
this is around the time still where the family film as a genre hadn't really kind of been ironed out as
Yeah.
far as what it is as a business model.
Right.
So you still have things like couple years before, things like Stand By Me and Goonies and things like that. And they are movies that, like Goonies especially is one that I think can appeal to kids, like junior high kids.
Mhm.
But it almost tends to sway a little bit more to the adult side of things. And I think later on the pendulum swung the other way, where family films were much more about pleasing the kids,
Yeah.
or making it safe for the kids from the adult's point of view.
Right.
And I think Sandlot was sort of this, it's kind of a little closer to the middle
Mhm.
than, say, something like Goonies is, or
Sure.
Stand By Me. And so I guess where it started to lean a little bit more towards traditional family film fare is where I started to kind of, I didn't remember it being like that at all. This is the big scene I'm thinking of, is when Benny finally gets the ball, the Great Bambino ball, and he's running from the beast. It just
That
gets,
chase scene is horrible.
It's cringeworthy. It really is. And I don't even remember. I remember him being chased.
I do too,
not remember any of that cake scene.
Oh
with
my
like,
gosh.
if it's been a while since you've seen the movie, there's like this really slapstick, but bad slapstick kind of thing where these two pastry chefs are holding a cake,
Giant cake.
a layered cake, and you just know what's gonna happen is that and you know that Benny and the beast, or Hercules, is running right towards it. There's also right before that they're running through a movie theater and the dog comes through the screen.
Well, yeah, because like they cut away randomly. We didn't even know there was this auditorium, whatever. Like all of a sudden we're in the middle of the chase scene, cut to people watching the Wolfman.
And in all these, I don't know what the Wolfman has to do with it.
Well, and then they kept cutting back and forth. I think the only joke there is that the people would have been extra scared that a dog came through the screen because
they're
they
watching
were
a
already
horror
watching
movie
about
and-
a man being bitten by
Wow.
a dog. But like, you don't see any audience react. Like, it's just the dumbest.
It is. It's dumb.
like it's like 45 seconds to a minute of the chase scene is taken up setting that joke up, and then they don't even like try to make it pay off. It's terrible.
And the cuts in it are like this weird kaboom edit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like this
I
weird,
noticed.
like,
It was
I don't know how to
that-
even explain it. It's like a,
They're like it's like a graphic sort of.
it's a
that comes
graphic of
through.
like this big boom, like
Yeah.
cloud thing,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
how you switch in the editing to a new scene in this
so weird.
great. I don't know if maybe it's because they had just watched Raising Arizona and they thought this was like a fun thing they could do like that, or maybe it was just some
I
producer.
would not give them that credit.
No, I guess I was trying to be as charitable as I possibly could in that. I can only hope that maybe it was a studio producer or someone saying this needs to have something that appeals more directly to the kids in the audience. I don't know. It didn't need to be there.
Not at all.
You could have that chase scene. You could have done it a totally different way. But it also kind of starts to diminish this thing that I really think the movie was trying to say about Benny sort of building up his legend. He's making this big decision to go after this beast, to face it head on.
Yeah.
He has that vision from the Babe, the Great Bambino, and it has the big tagline of the movie, which I think is the sort of deep thing they want you to get from this, which is the heroes get remembered, but legends never die. And this is like everyone has a moment that they have to face. It's kind of the sort of where they try to put the Field of Dreams kind of inspiration into the movie.
Now, you feel like that the chase scene diminished Benny's legend?
I just feel like the tone of the movie right before that was actually, it was about the closest you would get to any sort of emotional pull in the movie.
I can see that because it was a really tough choice for him to make.
It was a tough choice to make, and you get this, this is really where Benny, all throughout the movie, Benny is a character who kind of rises above as far as the choices that he makes. Sort of, he's got this almost vision of almost like he's got he's in a world all his own in a sense, but in a good way. And he plays the leader because he just seems to be kind of above everyone, but not in an arrogant sort of way, but just as a person who tends to kind of see things more holistically, have a better way of understanding the world that we all should aspire to, things like that, you know?
Yeah, you know that kid.
You know that kid.
Well, about Benny, I did want to say, I think the character was good. Like, the character is well written. He's not unbelievably good. Like, I think he's plausibly just sort of a quiet, good, talented kid. I thought the actor was so flat.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like, he had very little charisma, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know if that's something I can really judge.
Acting ability is it's terrible. Like, some of his line readings, it was like,
I was impressed that these kids actually did seem to know how to play ball a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of wonder when they're casting if they had to decide, all right, are we going to take people who actually know how to catch a baseball or they know how to act? And they kind of had to choose one way or the other in some of these casting decisions.
That's true. You're right. I didn't think that the kids were like phenomenal actors. I think child acting actually has come a long way.
Yeah.
In the last few years. But it also didn't kill it for me. Like, I still think Benny's a good character and somebody that I can plausibly see looking up to as a kid, and even though the acting isn't great.
Need to practice, guys.
You're the best on the team. You don't need any practice.
No, you don't.
You're the best, man.
Come on, Benny, man. The kid is a L7 weenie.
Yeah. Oscar Mayer even. Foot long. Dodger dog. A weenie.
Laughing at Yaya? You run like a duck.
KK, but I'm
Part of the game, right?
yeah.
Now, how come he don't get to be?
Because he's a geek, man.
Can't catch.
Man, base up, you blockheads.
He is the one that brings in Smalls, basically defends him for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was interesting about this movie that I thought was very real is their portrayal of bullying, even.
Mm-hmm.
That I think, especially now that there's such a bully advocacy campaign going on right now, which I'm not knocking at all. That's a very legitimate thing. It's a legitimate issue in schools, bullying. Yep. But what I thought this movie did very well is represent that bullying isn't always as cut and dry as once a bully, always a bully.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not as cut and dry as, once you're a victim, you're going to be constantly bullied by this person. Yeah. There's a spectrum there. And I think this movie, especially in that junior high age, it kind of showed this realistic situation that can happen where the bullies actually end up becoming friends.
Yeah.
And that when you're that age, you tend to just, in general, bully whatever is unfamiliar.
Yeah. Well,
and that is you have someone like Benny that basically just rises above that.
He says, we don't know, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Rather than ridicule him. And I think that's the same thing with the sexism thing. Is it sexist just because they're ignorant of girls? Are they bullies just because they're doing what kids do naturally? They reject what they don't know.
I mean, they're mean to this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of lingering behind them in the group, and they are not really hiding the fact that they're name calling him, and not in a trash talking sort of way, but more in a sort of this kid's a loser,
Yeah.
L7 weenie,
Boy.
and the kid's right there. He can hear everything,
Yeah.
and that's bullying. I mean, if we were going to look at that as a school administrator or as someone who is, I'm not trying to belittle the
Right.
real issue of bullying, but I just think that by and large, a lot of times, bullying it often takes a form more like what's in the Sandlot sometimes.
Right, and it's surmountable, and it's something that you can grow through. I think I agree that bullying is a problem, and that the awareness of bullying is something that we should be keeping in mind. But I also think that you could get kind of a hair trigger on what you call bullying and what you step in on and what you whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I remember there were, when you were a kid, you got made fun of and you had to either prove yourself worthy or find other people to go hang out with. And like, granted, if those people continue to like follow you and ridicule you and you can't get away and it's not, but yeah.
I mean, I was not a kid where friendship always came easily.
Yeah.
And I remember being, I guess what you would call maybe bullying. But the funny thing is, in a lot of those cases, not all of them, but in some of those cases, the people who I remember bullying me ended up becoming some of my best friends.
Yeah. No,
it was
for
interesting.
Sure.
That was just the way it worked. This is the way the social situation works. And I don't know if I've seen another movie other than The Sandlot. Maybe, the other one that did actually, there was a tinge of it with a performance by Squints in Freaks and Geeks.
That's true. Freaks and Geeks. But I think it's in other movies of the time, and it's actually something movies of that time is something I want to talk about. Mighty Ducks. You've got when Adam Banks joins the Ducks.
Right.
He's
I remember that. Yeah.
And mocked for being rich and whatever, and then he ends up becoming,
yeah.
Cake Eater is now appropriated to be a positive. So I think at the time it was something that was shown. But you're right. The Sandlot definitely approaches it. I will say that I think that scene is a bit quick and silly, where they're like, "This kid's terrible.
He's all right."
And then like he squints his eyes, like has his glove up, and Benny magically
hits the ball into his hand. Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, that kid's okay." Like, it was really quick.
Right.
Like, whatever. You've got to be economical with your time and stuff. But I just remember that being like,
Benny's.
Oh, well, that's pretty abrupt.
Benny's perfect hit into the glove was a little bit too much of a plot device for you.
Yeah. But I also can remember, like, again, if this is a movie through the eyes of kids, like, how many times did you like tell a story that was like, and he hit it right into his hand?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, man, well, maybe he didn't, whatever. But like,
well, and maybe this is
that,
even
that
still...
detail wasn't what was important. What was important was that you made that
right.
The ball ended up in your glove.
Yeah.
However that happened. And if everybody remembers it happening that way, then that's how it happened.
And maybe this is yet another reason why that movie is so close to my heart, is because I was the outfielder in Pee Wee. I was the guy I was terrible at baseball. I loved playing it, but I was terrible at it. So I was in left field every single game.
You sure you weren't right field?
I was left field. So maybe I wasn't. There was one kid that
there's
was
a kid from your childhood
and
listening to this,
and I was second. Yeah.
Wiping a tear.
His name was David.
David. Sorry.
Yeah, and and I was the second last to bat, and he was the one right behind me. So we were like the two worst ones. But I remember I would be petrified every time a ball got hit my way. But one time I did exactly what Smalls did. I just put my hand up and I caught it, and it was like
you should. And you're a lefty too, so you put your right hand up.
Yes,
looking even more like a goon.
I know they were all shaking their heads as the ball was in the air, but I caught the thing, and it was like this memory that still very much sticks with me, because I can remember the bleachers just like. They were just ecstatic because they couldn't believe I actually caught the ball.
Yeah.
But
the
funny
in your
thing
mind were the bleachers like full and it was like a huge noise?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was like 7 parents.
You're probably right. And 2 of them were my parents.
Yeah.
But I just remember that so well and so vividly. And I think maybe baseball is just a good it's just one of those sports that a lot of us played at that age, and it creates those kind of memories for you. Mm-hmm. These very almost larger than life memories a lot of times. So
yeah, that's funny. I'm for people who don't know me, I'm pretty tall, and I've always been tall, and I think that helps when you're a kid. Like, I mean, I know that helps. If I was the object of ridicule, it was fairly short-lived because I either had good enough self-esteem that it like kind of rolled off me, or I do remember just kind of attacking people.
Yeah.
not like losing my mind, but just like, you can't talk to me that way, and
Right.
throwing somebody down a hill.
Yeah. And that was the end of it, probably.
Yeah. So I wonder if that affected how I watched this movie. That like maybe as an adult, I've got more insecurities than I did as a kid. So I identify with Smalls more now than I did when I was back then. And I just watched it and been like, well, I'm not quite Benny, but I'm nobody else.
Right.
Like, so I just didn't connect with the movie. I don't know.
Well, I guess maybe that's a good point, because maybe this movie is actually, it's in a lot of ways for the insecure, or for all the insecurities that we maybe have in us. And it's kind of this interesting portrayal of how we deal with this, how we hide it, and how other people react to it, and eventually how we all basically end up either forming a friendship around it, or and I think the movie's also real about the way these friendships often end up.
Yep.
That they all just kind of go their own way.
I really liked that. I really liked that it's not ham-fisted in its message. Like, there isn't a huge thing Smalls needs to overcome, and maybe it's good then that that scene is abrupt because they don't belabor it. It's just, yeah, okay, and then this kid got better. And it doesn't it's not like, be like Benny, or like anything. There's no real villain. There's no bad guy.
Right. In fact, I was I feel like we bring him up in every single podcast, but I was reading Roger Ebert's review of The Sandlot, and he brought up the really good point that this is a sports movie with not even a big game.
Right. Yeah.
There's no big game in this.
Exactly. I thought about that too, that it's not for only the athletically inclined, like,
which is probably why I liked it so much.
It could be. It could be. But I really liked at the end that he just talks about, there was one friend, we never heard from him again. There's another friend who stuck around. There's another friend who I've heard from every now and then. And then there's one friend that I'm still pretty close with.
Right.
And that's totally fine. Like,
I kept in touch with those guys over the years, and I found out that Yaya's parents shipped him off to military school. After the Army, he became one of the pioneering developers of bungee jumping. Of course, we all know why. Bertram got really into the 60s, and no one ever saw him again. Timmy and Tommy became an architect and a contractor. They started out small, designing playground equipment and prefabricated tree houses. But they became multimillionaires when they invented mini-malls.
well, I wondered as I watched this, why this movie endures for people. Why this is the movie that people quote constantly. I mean, honestly, I don't think I go a week without hearing, "You're killing me, Smalls." I mean, this movie does hit all the marks of movies aimed at kids from that time. You've got the slobs versus snobs in that one game where they play the Tigers. All the kids who have bikes and they've got their own field and they've got uniforms. They play that one game. You've got oldies music, which, like, that was shorthand for everybody enjoy yourselves. In the early 90s. You've got harebrained schemes using like all these elaborate contraptions. Like, there's almost like a Home Alone element to
there
that.
There is,
that
with the erector sets.
Right.
You've
got the slobbery dogs, which, as I thought about it, was actually kind of more of a trope than I initially remembered. You got Beethoven, Turner
That's
and
true.
Hooch. Like,
oh gosh, you remember that scene in
dogs?
Beethoven where he's like muddy on the bed and
Yes.
he's looking at him like, oh no.
Yeah.
And there's just that slow motion, like slobber and dirt everywhere.
Right.
It
Like,
still grosses me out.
what was it with the early 90s and dog slobber and why people
know.
and you even have the mean old man who turns out to be like crazy nice
Yeah.
at the end.
That's-
This movie just kind of hits all these hallmarks. But I wondered why this movie and not Mighty Ducks, not Little Giants, not the big green heavyweights, Little Big League, Rookie of the Year, Angels in the Outfield. Like, people will remember Angels in the Outfield
Parts of
mainly
it,
because of
yeah.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but you will never. I can't quote Angels in the Outfield. We both can quote Rookie of the Year.
At least the one name in it, the funky butt loving.
Yes.
Everyone knows that. Yeah.
If you don't know that, then go see Rookie of the Year. I'd actually be interested to see if it remains on cuts of it.
Funky butt loving?
Yeah, I can see them taking that out
To something else.
or just cutting it. I've
Yeah.
seen that in some movies. Do you remember the movie Blank Check?
Yeah.
There was a scene where he says like, "There's more than one way to skin a cat," and he talks about one way is to put like a hose in its butt and like it expands, whatever. They just completely cut that out. And when I caught it on TV,
Maybe on the
other day.
Criterion edition.
Yeah, maybe. But so why this movie? What separates it?
Well, and you're not the only one asking this question. We actually got an email this week from listener Jason, who kind of was asking a little bit of the same thing. He just didn't seem to understand why people go so crazy for the film. He said, "I've seen The Sandlot at least 5 times, and to be completely honest, I've never understood why people go crazy for this film. It's entertaining, though. The story is cohesive, and I guess it definitely has remarkable characters and quotable lines. But for some reason, it never had the life-changing effect for me that it seemed to have for many of my peers. I really only kind of like it. And the 5 times that I've seen it has more to do with the continued attempts to try and figure out what I'm missing. On top of that, the film is so widely loved for me to not get it was always an area of forced embarrassment. Too many times I've nodded along and smiled to the phrase, 'You're killing me, Smalls.'" So you're not the only one that's asking these questions. Are you asking me, or are you just
Well,
did
yeah,
you
I
come
guess
to
I'm asking
some
you.
sort of conclusion?
No, I haven't come to any conclusion because if you,
You know, okay, so this is the weird thing that I feel like with The Sandlot is that even though the kid actors aren't that great and in a lot of ways they're kind of delivering their lines, I can't really explain it, but there seems to be almost a little bit more of a conversational feel to the dialogue than in some of the other movies that felt a little bit more scripted to me. Obviously, we know this is a heavily scripted movie, but I don't know. Like, there's the scene in the treehouse, and there's also some weird cinematic style elements that you don't see in some of those movies, like the Legend of the Beast and the Forever. You want to know what makes people remember that is the close up of the dude with the mustache and his lips and the black and white. And I mean, there's something about that that's a cinematic throwback that I don't think you get. There's also a cinematic throwback to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly when Benny is facing off the beast. I mean, it's almost cut for cut, sort of that wide angle shot. And so maybe it's some of these little flares in the movie that just kind of make it stick out a little bit more. I don't know.
the Sandlot's a lot less plot driven
That's
than
true
any
too.
of those movies, and maybe that is part of what makes it more relatable to people. That there are elements of it that you feel like you can enjoy that the movie doesn't hinge on. The movie doesn't rely on. You don't like the chase scene? Yeah, that's fine. What about the game where they played under the fireworks?
It's
What
almost
about
like
the
a
trip to
sort
the
of
pool? Like,
it's almost like a series of vignettes. You could almost break it down.
It is
into.
and
that's
is more in line with American Graffiti or Dazed and Confused.
The plot really isn't all that important in this movie. In fact, the real crisis in the movie doesn't happen until I think close to 50 minutes into it, where you actually lose the baseball to the beast, which is really the most plot-driven element in the story. Is how are they going to get this baseball? You know. One thing I do want to do is that I want to talk about our poll a little bit to talk about how that shook out, and we had just like every period before our episode, we tell you what we're going to talk about, and we ask you to give us some feedback about what you thought of this movie. And I think we kind of predicted that because this was such a sort of a childhood staple of so much of our listening group, our target demographic, that we kind of thought that this was going to be a big love it camp. And you know, for the most part, I think it did basically shake out that way. You had 50%, and we also changed up the poll a little bit. We added a few more options.
We did,
to diversify a little bit. You could either love it, you could say that you really liked this movie, you could say that you thought Sandlot was okay, or you could say that you were not a fan of The Sandlot. And the way it shook out was half, that's 50% of our listeners love this movie. Not even a tinge of really liked it. This was love this movie. Half of our listeners.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Like I said, I hear You're Killing Me, Smalls probably every week.
Right.
And I'm not surprised by that.
It's like if we were going to pull the AFI and put Citizen Kane up there.
Right. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So, and then we had 20% of you really liked this movie. And then 30% said it was okay. And nobody said they weren't a fan of The Sandlot.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because I don't think it's a movie that deserves ire. Like, if I think maybe at some point in my life where I was feeling more elitist, I would have said, "Well, I hate that movie," just because everybody
Likes
loves it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as you can guess, I said I thought it was okay. I don't know if I could change my vote to really like it. I think I would campaign.
You're still
for,
saying
I would
it's just
campaign
okay?
for a fifth.
Fifth?
A fifth choice.
4 wasn't enough.
Because the leap from it's okay to I really liked it is right now a bigger one than I'm willing to take. Here's how I would change my vote.
Okay.
Before I watched it again, I said, it's okay. Now I'm changing it to, it's okay.
Okay. So you're saying in the next poll we might need to have audio clips
Yeah,
of
we'll have
people's
to-
inflections
I'll be reading
of
it,
these
yeah.
poll questions.
Yeah. Like, you can tell the elitist, ugh, not a fan. And then you've got the, not a fan. So every choice is going to have two
There's
options.
a gradient within that.
Right. So I thought this movie was okay. I'm all right with The Sandlot. Yeah, I liked it. I'd say whatever I have to say about The Sandlot, I will say in a high-pitched voice.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess that's an improvement over the baritone I kept hearing it in before.
Yeah. So that would be my character.
Well, I guess
name. That
that's
would be my character name in The Sandlot.
Your character would be, this is Ryan. It's okay,
It's
Evelyn.
okay.
Because everything's just okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the best I can ask for at this point. I mean, you did give it a chance.
I
and
genuinely
you did,
hope that you know that this is like a positive thing. I'm not just being
yeah.
okay.
What would this movie have had to have done?
It would
as
have
far
had
as
to be
I'm-
funny again. Like,
So it's the fact that it's, yeah, I guess if you don't find this movie funny, and it's something it's certainly trying to do,
Right.
to be funny, and you don't think it delivers on that level.
no.
That's a really hard thing to argue.
Yeah,
what
it is.
people find funny and what they don't find funny. But I didn't change a bit. I
I'm
still
sure
love this
you
movie
Probably,
just as much.
You probably just stamped an extra love it on there.
If I could say love it in a higher pitch, if I could say Sandlot, love it.
You can.
I just did.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying is I'm going to do that.
Oh, that's
So
your thing now.
That's
Okay.
my thing.
That's.
I'm Nate. Love it, Gus.
All right. So for our next episode, we're going to switch things up a little bit. Nate, why don't you tell them what the plan is?
Yeah, so we both noticed that Time Out New York just last Wednesday, this April 16th, published their 100 best animated movies of all time. And we noticed that number 1 on that list, spoiler alert, I guess. I don't know. We'll definitely want to put the link up. But number 1 they picked was Disney's Pinocchio, a classic. And we were talking and realized that neither one of us really remember that film all that much. So
Yeah, I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
yeah, we thought it'd be a good idea. It's a little bit of a change from our regular format, but we thought it'd be a good idea to revisit that movie together to see if we do actually agree with each other on that movie.
Yeah, or whether we agree with Time Out. So instead of Nate and I sparring with one another, we're going to team up and take on Time Out New York specifically.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty even match.
I think so.
Yeah, so we're gonna do Pinocchio, and I really hope that you guys join us on this. Grab the Blu-ray or DVD and give it a watch.
Yeah.
And let us know as you're doing it what you think of the movie. Remember to check out the website canwestillbefriends.net, where you'll be able to give us an email, give us a phone call. The number again is 847-306-9532. Let us know your experience, maybe watching Pinocchio the first time, any weird memories you have of it, because it's kind of a weird movie from what I kind of remember.
Yeah, or if you have something to say about The Sandlot or other movies that have impacted your childhood, do you think Sandlot is the one that should be remembered as the greatest of the children's movies, as it seems to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're now on the Stitcher app.
Yep.
Find us there. Talk to us on Twitter, Facebook, subscribe on iTunes.
Give us a review if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We'll have on the podcast episode itself. Make sure you comment if you don't feel like doing the email or call thing. Just comment on the website itself, and we'll talk a little bit with you about all the past episodes we have up there.
Yep. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
So anyways, thanks for listening again, and until next time, keep on trucking.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.